I just wanted to throw up. I was so happy about it. She's not going to be safe with a prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love. The original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. Weird.
Once upon a time, movies were about ideas that would give audiences something new, something they hadn't seen or thought about before. The plots would be intriguing and the characters complex. Nowadays, watching a movie often feels like watching a political speech with a set agenda and the same commonplace, empowering messages that sound more and more contrived for each time actors, producers, and directors repeat them. In the name of pretend diversity, what people were born as and what their name is, real diversity of thought, has long since left the movies, and producers are walking on eggshells, trying not to offend their fellow members of the buzzword club with platitudes and cliches. To give context to Rachel's fascinating comments, let's start with a clip from a much different era. In the following, Brad Pitt talks about his role as Detective Mills in Seven from 1995, officially one of the greatest thrillers of all time.
It certainly keeps you on the edge of your seats, doesn't it?
Right. But I think it's very honest about it, you know? Bleak, but honest. Being as tough as life is, seeing people, you know, go to these depths, you know, it's horrifying. But there's a fascination, you know, why do people slow down at car wrecks, you know? I did like the character. I wanted to get something more human, more flawed, more realistic.
His focus is on realism, the inevitable bleakness, which is also part of reality, but which is ignored in today's climate of pretend positivity. Also, he's focused on flaws, because in reality, people are flawed, unlike what modern-day cinema wants us to believe about certain characters who can do no wrong, barely need any training to do what they do, and definitely don't need anyone telling them what to do. Hollywood's become narcissistic. It's drowning in nonsensical, strong and independent slogans, when the truth is the exact opposite, that Hollywood's weaker than it's ever been in terms of storytelling and ideas, and that it's never been more dependent than now. Dependent on the approval of interest groups that don't care about art, but about virtue signaling. Today, the most valued goal is to make sure that these groups aren't offended by movies, regardless of how much history has to be rewritten, and irrespective of the fact that said groups don't even watch the movies in the first place. Even the basics of branding are being ignored by studios in order to please people that aren't even close to being the primary target audience. This is what David Lynch had to say about his idea for the movie Lost Highway from 1997. Again, this is from an era that's long gone.
After something like that, and that experience, how does the mind protect itself from that knowledge and go on? And that's interesting to me. And the mind is interesting, you know, for sure. Huge stories in the mind. How does the mind trick itself so that that can be put in a place where it no longer has that, you know, horrific power, and you go on living? There's things that have to happen for the thing to go. The Mystery Man, you know, provided that.
Lost Highway is based on the idea of exploring the depths of the mind, which is very similar to what Seven wished to accomplish. Whether we think the movies succeeded or not, at least the intentions behind them were based on giving audiences interesting things to think and talk about. Both movies also had carefully thought out, distinct visual styles, making them visually interesting. Before moving on to Rachel's cringeworthy but telling interview, let's compare what we just heard to Kathleen Kennedy's ideas, or lack thereof.
And this woman walked up to me and she said, "You're Kathy Kennedy, aren't you?" We made a condition of the license that they hire women in technical positions, and you were one of them. It's really put me in a position to make decisions. Recently went to a Saturday Night Live taping, and I was sitting at the front row of the balcony, and I leaned over and I turned to my husband, I said, "Look, there are no women." It's completely unacceptable. 50% of our executive team are women. Mm-hmm. And 6 out of 8 of the people in my story group are women.
Contrary to what we've heard so far, Kathleen's agenda is an ideological one that has nothing to do with interesting ideas, captivating plotlines, or visually pleasing styles. She's about quotas, and she focuses on the outer characteristics of her team, not only as if that's what art is about, but also as if this is what true diversity is about. In the process, she ignores that diversity is also diversity of thought, that people don't have to be born different in order for them to have very different opinions and goals. Like politicians, Kathleen views people as groups, and each group is expected to believe the same and want the same. Thus, she's actually as exclusive as they come, which is exactly why people like her need to brand themselves as inclusive, before this word is rightfully used against them. Rachel's similar to Kathleen in that she's focused on all the modern empowerment messages.
I mean, you know, the original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so.
This is the first hint of the anachronistic view that's about to be on full display. Nowadays, people from what I call the buzzword club look at the past through the lens of today, what people like them consider or pretend to consider good and bad, in order to be in good standing with the other members of the club. With her obvious condescension, she's openly disrespecting the source material, which sadly isn't new but is something we've become accustomed to, especially in the last decade.
There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her. Yeah.
She even has that rising intonation.
There's a big focus on her love story,
which not only points to immaturity and disrespect, but also lack of ability to think critically and in depth. As if what the Grimm brothers originally wrote can be boiled down to
her love story.
And the stalking part is another sign of her anachronistic thinking, if in fact this even deserves to be called thinking.
Weird, 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 weird.
Each clip just makes her more and more relatable. This is slowly becoming an unexpected emotional experience for me.
So we didn't do that this time.
This is the exact problem with modern Hollywood, whereas in the 90s and even the early 2000s, the filmmakers and actors would take on projects because they admired and wanted to stay true to the source material. Today it's about taking advantage of the source material because they don't have the originality or thinking capacity to create something as original and, dare I say, beautiful as Snow White. So they use the original's name to excite audiences. Who wouldn't want to watch Snow White? A movie whose plot and characters they've rewritten. There's another simple word for this business model that they promote as progressive, and that word is exploitation.
So no Prince or a different kind of Prince?
We have a different approach to what I'm sure a lot of people will assume is a love story just because like we cast a guy in the movie, right. Andrew Burnap, great dude. Yeah.
She keeps using the so-called institutional we as if she's the director and decides which actors to cast. Also, she talks down to the audience as if they'll assume it's a love story just because a man is part of the movie. Because as we all know, a male actor always means that the movie is about love. I wonder what she thinks Silence of the Lambs is about then. I mean, since it had Anthony Hopkins in it. And of course, the audience isn't half as smart as Rachel, who knows better, of course.
It's one of those things that I think everyone's going to have their assumptions about what it's actually going to be, but...
Too late for that modification, Rachel. You already assumed what people's assumptions were, and it certainly didn't make you look like you think too highly of the audience you hope will actually go see this disaster.
It's really not about the love story at all, which is really, really wonderful. And whether or not she finds love along the way is anybody's guess until 2024.
Why is that wonderful? Is it because finding love isn't empowering enough, isn't stunning and brave enough? What kind of a presupposition is that? And why isn't she challenged on it? Also, as someone who's actually read and enjoyed most of the Grimm brothers' fairy tales, what she calls the love story isn't just an add-on or just one of the many themes in the fairy tale. It's the very essence of the fairy tale. All scenes are leading up to the moment when she meets the prince, Snow White finally finding someone and something real. The story is about real versus fake and finding someone who complements you. It's not about what she's been taught to think is strong and independent. With remarks like these, Rachel exposes her superficiality, which is why I'm always excited to see a new interview she's done.
All of Andrew's scenes could get cut. Who knows? It's Hollywood, baby.
What an original phrase to end an original interview about an original movie. Ironically, however, she's right. This is Hollywood, and Rachel's the perfect example of what Hollywood has become. Unoriginal, predictable, entitled, and disrespectful. The fact that Rachel can do an interview like this and not think that she comes across badly is an illustration of what Hollywood is. The level of entitlement is off the charts. When we compare Rachel's behavior to the celebrity branding model, which is about scoring high on parameters like likability and similarity, it appears that she's out of touch with the vast majority of people. Like the rest of modern Hollywood, she's devoid of self-awareness. But it doesn't end here. Things are about to get worse, and thus unintentionally entertaining.
Why were you crying?
Oh my gosh, I saw the well, we didn't even see.
Overwhelming.
We didn't even see, but I saw the logo and I went, that's my name, Snow White's up there, and I cried my eyes out.
What was it that made her cry her eyes out, or supposedly made her cry her eyes out? Was it the interesting ideas in the in-depth movie? Was it the team effort? No, she cried, presumably, because she saw her name on the big screen. Rachel made Rachel cry. Great to hear. That doesn't sound navel-gazing at all. And we're lucky, because Rachel can't stop talking about her favorite subject. Rachel.
What was it like seeing yourself for the first time in full Snow White drag?
I love that description. It's perfect. Oh my god, well, when you get to wear Sandy Powell, first of all, insane. And then you get to be lit by Mandy Walker, and Nadia Stacey designed your hair and makeup. It's like the most incredible thing in the world. And then all of a sudden you open your eyes and you watch the playback, which I never do. And I saw myself on screen and I just wanted to throw up. I was so happy about it.
If that's what she does when she's happy, what does she do when she's unhappy? That's one question I don't need her to answer.
The fan reaction was insane. We didn't even see what they were clapping for. I think it was good. I don't know.
The sizzle. We didn't see anything.
Yeah.
The only reason why she can even talk about a fan reaction is because of the powerful name of the source material, Snow White, a story that almost everyone around the world knows, the source material that she can't stop disrespecting. This is the inherent contradiction in her logic. I apologize for the use of this term in this context. Obviously, people don't find it outdated or old-fashioned. It's always been and still is one of the most popular fairy tales. But who cares about truth when there's so much virtue signaling to do?
You said you were bringing a modern edge to it on stage. What do you mean by that?
I just mean that it's no longer 1937, and we absolutely wrote a Snow White that is
not going to be saved by the prince.
She's not going to be saved by the prince.
By stating this as the movie's modern edge, the two of them are unintentionally admitting that the movie doesn't have an edge at all. If this is what's most important for them to highlight, then the movie doesn't contain any highlights. It's worth noting that their thought process starts with the word modern, as if modern means good, even though there's no logical connection between the two. Also, there's no logical connection between something being old and also being outdated or less desirable. This is a covert way of arguing, where she doesn't prove her claims, but simply presuppose them as fact. Like politicians would. Rachel and Kathleen would be great business partners. Also, the name and central elements of the story were good enough for them, because they know it's about to make them inordinate amounts of money. Hollywood marketing has no honor. It's easy for actors and filmmakers to get away with superficial statements like these, because the interviewers are their allies. The cringeworthy Barbie interview with director Greta Gerwig is another example of this.
And also I think the thing that we knew that was also at the core of it was not just vis-a-vis the brand but just the story and the characters was that I knew what we wanted at the center of it was just a really big heart, and that part of it was so...
The actors seem very comfortable with talking about it as a feminist film, but somehow it doesn't matter that you talk about it differently.
Yeah, I mean, well, it most certainly is a feminist film.
Can you explain that? Why? How so?
To me, it's that's one slice of the pie. Like it's so
It's pretty big.
it's a big slice, but like
it's also a humanist film because it's like the
Quite a brave decision too to give Ken such a big character in the end.
There are no follow-up questions to Greta's almost incomprehensible stream of consciousness. According to critical discourse analysis, their presupposition rests on years and years of so-called social practice, the societal structures and developments that have caused people to think of certain discourses as good and other discourses as bad. Apparently, we now live in a time when Hollywood tries to create a hegemony that it's bad when a man saves a woman. Hegemony can be understood as the winning discourse. And it's not just Hollywood. The same ideology, which is a much too intelligent term for what's going on, is in almost every ad campaign as well. I like how their statements are so well thought out and deep. If it continues like this, we're in for a real treat.
And she's not going to be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be.
Because dreaming about true love is just so bad, and being a leader totally proves Rachel's profound understanding of the source material. It doesn't sound like a made-up, contrived phrase in order to be in good standing with the Buzzword Club at all. No, it sounds so strong and independent. Real, completely independent thinking.
And so it's just a really incredible story for, I think, young people everywhere to see themselves in.
Snow White is running for president.
Because a movie about a fairy tale, parts of the fairy tale, my mistake, which is devoid of fairy tale-like qualities and relies on platitudes and buzzwords for marketing, sets such a great example for young people. Yet another movie with rewritten plotlines and characters and devoid of the solid values that the fairy tale is built on and that made it great to begin with is exactly what young people need, because we totally don't have an abundance of that already. For people who try so hard to convince other people how modern and progressive they are, they look strangely out of touch and, dare I say, regressive. But then again, being progressive has become indistinguishable from being regressive. Thank you so much, Rachel, for revolutionizing the movie industry. I have a confession to make. These interviews made me cry. I don't know about you, but these interviews have made me want to watch a good 90s movie. In that sense, these interviews have actually done something good. See you next time.